Well, as we see, this is now a national crisis across the U.S., but the epicenter of the unrest remains Minneapolis. And joining us from that city is Steve Hunegs. He's the executive director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas. Thanks for joining us, Steve. Let's start with more general perspective. As a resident of Minneapolis, your reaction to what is happening in your city?
Shavuot Tov, Calev. Thank you for having me on your show, and greetings to all of our friends and family in Israel. Calev, we've had some of the worst days in the history of the state of Minnesota, which dates back to 1858. We had George Floyd murdered in broad daylight by a now former police officer of the Minneapolis Police Department, while his colleagues did nothing to intervene. We've had nights of rioting and arson and civic dislocation in a huge manner. But we've also seen the best in people. You can look and see the volunteers who showed up yesterday morning, your picture in the Minneapolis Star Tribune, to help. We've had our faith leaders, our first responders, people protesting peacefully, people allowing the police to do their jobs by obeying the curfew. So we've seen the best in people also. And so that's the perspective. But we have so much work to do in our community. The murder of Mr. Floyd exposes so many fissures in our community. The Jewish community knows well difficulties and pain. And at this time, we reach out to the African American community and all communities to provide assistance. We are all in this together. And Justice, as Attorney General.
Steve, let me actually read out a statement from the JCRC demanding justice for George Floyd. Quote, "Our hearts break for Mr. Floyd's family and friends. We are also devastated for our friends and neighbors in the African American community, including Jews of color. Your pain is our pain." And obviously the Jewish community reaching out across to the African American community. But we also do see, for example, we saw a synagogue that was defaced during a protest, or if you want to call them riots, in Los Angeles. That happened overnight. We know that in these kind of situations, we saw extremists on both right and left can also target Jews rhetorically and either otherwise. So talk about the relationship, that reaching out of the Jewish community to the African American community.
It starts with the personal. One of my dearest friends is Stephen Belton, who's the executive director of Urban League Twin Cities. We talk every day. Just yesterday, we connected and he reached out to me because there was a rumor that white supremacists were going to attack African-American churches in the Twin Cities. We've been working with the African-American community precisely on that issue, church security, with our own director of community security and our own work. We could link back to those discussions and the need for the protection of our African-American churches. It's these relationships on the ground, even in these most difficult times, that endure and allow us to help the African American community and the African American community to assist the Jewish community. We are bound up in our years of history, but of course there are unique circumstances and aspects to the suffering of the African American community in the United States, and it is imperative that the Jewish community be there to help. Calev.
Right. Now, Steve, I want to ask you about some of President Trump's comments, which some have said have not been helpful to the situation. You can express yourself personally. If not personally, you could speak more about the general reaction there in this city, and of course, your American Jewish mayor there, Jacob Fry.
Right. You know, as I said before, the circumstances that we're facing in Twin Cities were unprecedented in the history, and Mayor Carter and Mayor Frey and our Adjutant General of the National Guard and Governor Walz and our wonderful African-American Commissioner of Public Safety, John Harrington, all have been working very hard together to try to address the issue, starting with justice for George Floyd and his memory, and then helping to restore public safety, keeping in mind the imperative right of people to exercise their First Amendment rights. The things that we do together are so important right now. Judge Lejeune Lang, a retired African-American judge of Hennepin County, the county in which Minneapolis resides, pointed something out practically to me this morning. She said, our small businesses, our restaurants, they need to get back into businesses. This is often the heart of a minority economy. what are the things that we can do together to help restore these businesses? And those are the practical things. Yes, we talk about dismantling systemic racism, but Calev, it's so important that we're working together on practical bread and butter issues, helping African-American businesses get off the ground. And I'm very proud to say that we have based in Minnesota and Minneapolis, Comm, which is the only national Jewish disaster relief organization, happens to be based here. And they're going out today into the streets of Minneapolis to help too.
All right, Steve, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Steve Hunegs of the JCRC in Minneapolis. And of course, our best wishes for the city, and hopefully things will calm down in the coming days.